Hey guys, I'm John Mosho, and you're listening to Nick Nack Goes to the Movies, the one-stop shop podcast for all things movie, TV, and pop culture.
Turns out he's a major cinephile. They don't watch enough movies! It's a very simple formula! And here we go. Greetings, loyal listener. I'm Nick, and this is Nick Nack Goes to the Movies. Even if I have not physically been to the movies since this podcast creation and COVID-19 started. Just got vaccine dose part 1 though, so hopefully we'll be back to movie theater life soon. But look, we are, even if we're not at the movies, we're covering all things, movies, TV, and pop culture, just from a incredibly socially distant place. And with another week comes another HBO Max special, bringing the latest hit films directly to your home. Even though I started before this movie dropped, we're going to talk about a fantastic video game adaptation, but briefly want to talk about Jojo Rabbit. Was awesome. Waited way too long to see it. Award-nominated movie, award-winning movie. Go watch Jojo Rabbit on HBO Max right now. It will be gone at the end of this month, so watch that immediately. But once you're done with that, I'm excited to talk about this. We haven't done a whole lot of video game discussion, maybe a little bit during our Resident Evil episode, but I love video games. I, for a while, was very behind on gaming systems. I'm a Nintendo Switch person right now, which is lovely. Eventually, I want that PS4, PS5 life, but I'm a gamer, love it, and I'm ecstatic to cover the latest video game film adaptation. That's right, it's time to finish him in Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat. Oh man, that song is forever an amazing part of this franchise. And this amazing thing has spawned countless video games, but only a small amount of live action films. While you're probably most curious about how the 2021 adaptation of Mortal Kombat fares, I want to go back to the 90s and see how all three films stack up today. Are any of these flawless victories? Or is it just another brutality against the video game film adaptation reputation? Find out right here as round 1 takes us all the way back to 1995. I will just say it before we start. None of these films, especially the earlier two, were particularly stuffed with name brand recognized actors. And the first Mortal Kombat, 1995, no exception. And it really probably only has one actor for me that I knew not by name but by some of his roles. And he is the staple part of this first film. I am, of course, talking about Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa. While he is super known for Mortal Kombat, he is pretty gosh darn good in the amazing Amazon Prime series The Man in the High Castle, which is great if you like depressing thrillers that are also period pieces. Highly recommended. It fits right in there with Jojo Rabbit. But do you really care about the actor's name brandness here? Or do you just want to see heads getting literally punched off and such? Probably the latter. So weirdly, you can't watch all three on HBO Max. You have to take a detour to Peacock to watch the first of these films. And you'd think they'd dump Annihilation on Peacock, but I think they really want you to pay for both. Haven't done that one yet, but TBD. You don't have to pay for it here. You can just watch it with commercials, which was fine when I did it as well. So no matter what anyone says about this movie, the fact that it has an amazing catchy 80s synth theme song, it's pretty much just pew 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 laser sounds and a guy yelling Mortal Kombat. That will always slap as hard as the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers theme song. One day I'll have to see if those still stand up, the original ones. Look, no one is going to say this movie looks good from a special effects standpoint. It really doesn't. I don't think that opinion will ever be had by anyone and never will change. In fact, most of this movie doesn't even make sense. From the same man who brought you the first adaptation of Resident Evil to film, something that will be seen anew shortly enough. At times, this feels like a Paul W.S. Anderson movie, the good and the bad. And if you remember from that Resident Evil episode, I do actually like most of those movies, but they made some rough choices storytelling-wise and who to put the character focus on, and they left so many story beats either unresolved or quickly done up off camera. But between the weird color overlays, stereotypical 90s special forces shootouts, and just jumping from one location to the other like crazy, even more than the oldies James Bond movies, there's a lot to keep up with. and learn, especially if you have never had the privilege of playing even one Mortal Kombat game, and hopefully it's not the one Mortal Kombat vs. DC, because that doesn't count. It has to be higher than a T for teen. It has to be M for mature to count as a real Mortal Kombat game. Just a fact. If there is one amazing moment of casting, beside the villainous Shang Tsung, has to be Johnny Cage. I can't say I'm super knowledgeable about Lyndon Ashby and his career, and I can't imagine most of you are either. But speaking of those Resident Evil movies, in the third one of those, Extinction, where there's a ton of one-and-done characters who aren't exactly developed, but they're a fun enough group romping around in the over-zombified desert, he plays the cowboy chase there. Not integral to the plot, but fun enough when on camera. If you don't know the overall generic summary of these movies, in short, think Karate Kid with way more Kalima, heart ripping out. Shout out Indiana Jones and the hopeful good sequel with Mads Mikkelsen. We need a winner. It's every other one is good, so this could be the third good one. It is a fighting tournament with stakes that could impact the whole Earth and all the different versions, realms. I'll do realms in here, multiverse, all however you want to go, different worlds, right? The other video game movie adaptation about fighting is probably on par with these in Street Fighter, but we will get to those and Jean-Claude Van Damme eventually. Way too many video game adaptations of varying quality to list out here in this one episode. One thing that isn't so good, the costumes for the titular ninjas that are the mainstays to the series. If a Mortal Kombat movie is going to exist, you really have to make Scorpion and Sub-Zero look somewhat decent, and not Power Ranger Sunday morning rejects. These costumes look like the ones you'd buy at Party City. Rarely do you think the Party City ones look like you've seen them. In this instance, same. Different, but same. And I don't expect ice powers and lightning bolts coming out of guys' hands to look good. Trust me, they don't here. But remember, if anyone is going to diss special effects, remember what Star Wars did. The first came out in 1977 with an $11 million budget. This movie came out 20 years later and had a $30 million budget, so you gotta say there's no excuse. Also inexcusable, Sub-Zero and Scorpion aren't enemies and just random goons. Scorpion doesn't have a chain when he says get over here. Instead, he has like a metal snake come out of his hand. Insensitive and a disgrace to the source material. I actually think the main three characters of Sonya, Liu Kang, both from the 2021 version, and Johnny Cage, we'll get to that later, in this movie, they all have pretty good chemistry together. But while the group ensemble is grand, as far as the actual characters, Johnny Cage easily the best when it comes to actor portrayals of the characters they are cast as. I know. If you're a loyal listener to the show, I mock the 2003 Ang Lee Hulk on here often, for a good reason. But the CGI attempt on a reptile, a character who in source material switches from a color-swapped green ninja to a full-on lizard man. This rubbery, skinny creature might be one of the worst things I've ever seen in a movie. Ever. From a special effects or all-around standpoint. They really ran out of fighters with name brand recognition, which is crazy given the source material, to use early on when giving Shang Tsung the big bad, the equivalent of a Star Trek red shirt masked army. With the cast of characters, you should be able to find a real character or two to go off on, and not have the majority of your villain force be just random nobodies. Still waiting on Stryker to appear, or even cameo in one of these movies. I'm sure we all have a favorite Mortal Kombat character to play as, and we want those characters represented in the movie. Look, is he my favorite character? Probably not. But physically playing as him, I quite enjoy his controls and the moves. Nothing to do with the character, just physically the technical part. He's not the coolest character. No one would ever say that. I am sure I said this already, but Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa is perfect as the voice and character of Shang Tsung. Hearing him say, fatality and flawless victory. Joyous Easter egg references to the source material. There is a reason he was brought back to voice his version of the character in the Mortal Kombat 11 DLC. And I know Reptile's probably the worst CGI thing we've seen in this movie, but whoever designed Goro, it feels like someone made it and then had to elongate it in ways without keeping the aspect ratio intact. Someone really screwed that up. Somehow this four-armed monster looks way too tall and way too skinny. gosh, this is CGI in the Mummy sequel, half Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, half Scorpion bad. I'm sure he'd want to forget it. I know we want to forget it. But that Mummy sequel is out there, and it's what it is. I know he's the best thing now and maybe the savior of the Snyderverse and the XFL, and he's going to be in a superhero movie, seemingly a good one, with Pierce Brosnan. Love it. But this CG is reminiscent of that awfulness in that Mummy sequel. Good gosh. The appreciation for these movies has to be, beside that amazing song, yes, it is amazing, but the fighting is big and goofy and over the top as it should be. The slow motion jumps and kicks are a blast to watch. And just overall, super fun fighting. As long as the fighters are humans fighting each other without CGI nonsense piles getting into the ring. Yo, if they screwed up one thing in this movie, and they didn't, there's a few things. I don't know why this always feels weird to me. Letting Shang Tsung steal other souls with people he didn't fight, it just felt weird. Him getting them sloppy seconds when he didn't even fight. He's too cool and prideful for that, you would think. Slight oops, Mortal Kombat movie. When I think of the good in this movie, I know it pretty much just comes back to Johnny Cage. But gosh, he carries this movie on his back, puts the team on his back. From John Walker style fatalities to dumb autographs of himself. It feels like the writers knew that Liu Kang was too boring and lame to be the lead of that movie. But in making Johnny so much fun, they super destroyed any chance for Scorpion or Sub-Zero for that matter to mean anything in this movie. Ask anyone. He is one of two of the most recognizable and favorite characters in the entire franchise. Those two ninjas, Scorpion and Sub-Zero, will probably always be 1 and 2 in that order. I mean, some people may say Sub-Zero is more popular. I don't know. I mean, his whole fight style in this movie, though, sadly, relies almost entirely on garbage CGI. And he goes out like a punk. The guy throws a bucket of water through his ice shield and it becomes ice and impales him. A bucket of water is your ultimate doom. I kid you not. It's painful. It's painfully bad and stupid. And, apparently there was some more developed things that were supposed to happen, but when they make a character called Art Lean, a character who has never been in a video game and never mentioned since, not even remotely developed, but he was supposed to be a character that you met once, thought, oh, maybe he's okay at fighting, but it really was just there to make you think, oh no, if that guy can't take on Goro, how is anyone? Not Art Lean, gosh. It was a useless character that was supposed to be a little more developed, but the fact that our characters were, so upset after the demise of Art Lean, come on. They knew what they were doing in putting in a character called Art Lean. What a bad... oh, painful. I know I haven't talked about Raiden at all in this movie, which is, you'd think, one of those weird things if you're a Mortal Kombat-er, but, he's supposed to be the Yoda mentor here. He comes off in this movie... It's a bit useless too. Not as useless as Art Lane, but up there, which is a little disappointing being a supposedly super powerful being. And we know he can only do so much. That's the whole thing, is he can only help. He can't intervene hardcore in anything. But they did something wrong with Raiden's role in this movie. This really has been, if I'm a journalist, a Johnny Cage puff piece. Thankfully, he does his signature split end testicular assault to stay super true to the source material. Not a Mortal Kombat thing, but a Paul W.S. Anderson thing. Apparently, random fun fact, he wrote all 4 Death Race movies. I mean, I like the first Jason Statham one. That movie's great. Last 2 or so, just kind of okay. Last one, the last one, I may not have even seen it. I know the second one does have Sean Bean, and I love him, and it was his birthday 6-7 days ago. Happy belated, Sean Bean. Amazing actor, love everything you're in. Even some of the bad stuff. Death Race 2 was not one of the better things. But Paul W.S. Anderson is also responsible for the first Alien vs. Predator, which, while not awful, definitely is not good at all. Not saying much to his track record, just putting all the words out there. I think the last thing was the very poorly received Monster Hunter movie. This may be, overall, a bad movie, but for the most part, they have a ton of references to the games. Not all good, but some good to be sure. And having an environmental fatality to end the film and conflict, outstanding. And there is a cheesy, nice, fun ending to be sure. until that eventual cliffhanger to a darker sequel, but at least the true end has that iconic bussin' track, the epitome of sheesh. You know what's not bussin'? The sequel, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which is available on HBO Max. Unfortunately, it starts with the trailer, at least if you watch it now, for the new movie, which looked much better in contrast. Before we get too into the film itself, which also has that amazing theme song. You really need to blast it on loop ASAP if you haven't already. But don't be swayed by that theme song. That theme song is great, but don't let that fool you what this sequel is gonna be. The cast is almost entirely different. Johnny Cage was recast too, unfortunately. While Shang Tsung is not in this, so many characters return. But outside of our new leads, and maybe, I don't know if Liu Kang was always the lead, I guess he was in this one. Outside of Liu Kang and Katana, who had a very briefly teased romance in the first one, she did not do a ton in that first film. Everyone else is different. Raiden was recast as the actor I knew the most, and we've talked about in here before in James Remar. He's still enjoying a stint in the swan song of the CW superhero first family drama in Black Lightning, and has been in other films including Django Unchained. And he is the cop or government agent in too many films to name. Kind of like Will Fichtner. I like him a lot, but while neither Raiden was super good, his version just doesn't work here at all. And let's get to the film's beginning and Johnny Cage. It's tough to mask your recasting of characters if it's kicking off immediately the sequel where the first one ended. Our hero's victory is short-lived, they seem to be invaded by Outworld, and if you forgot how bad the CGI was in the first one, this movie quickly reminds you how garbage it was. Ninjas are raining down on obvious green screen storms, and while the CGI monsters are more hybrid than before, they look terrible. Even Shao Kahn, the overall big bad, sounds like he is phoning it in when he says anything. This movie is brutal. And seeing newly recast characters for two of the three in our core group from the first and their mentor, it's all just bad, in the worst way. There are some quotes here that will live in infamy of the worst of all times. When I am reciting a quote from a movie on this podcast, it is normally not a good sign. Excluding that scene Genevieve and I did from Lord of the Rings, that movie and our reenactment was flawless. A victory, if you will. This is not that. Mother, you're alive? Too bad you will die. Painful. And you can't help but openly laugh. If you aren't going to watch this movie, you at least have to search that line on YouTube. The delivery is something to behold. They even start the movie with, besides awful costume designs, less actual fighting and more flying around over green screens, and they're using lightning bolts and magic beams for the majority of combat, which is brutal. New Johnny Cage sucks. He is not charismatic at all, and while his portrayal is not good, he also immediately dies. So you never know what could have been. As one of the best parts of the first movie, it's a true crime that he is immediately taken out of the overall franchise and story for the sequel. This is also the end of the franchise, if you can believe it or not. He was the heart of the first movie. While Liu Kang was the overall hero, he is never going to be the one to provide levity to the series. And while Mortal Kombat has to be violent AF, it is also supposed to be kind of funny. And without that main source of humor, this movie is just a bad, poorly made, I guess, action movie. Kind of an action fantasy, really. Also, having our heroes find more heroes, but traveling in like supersonic hamster wheels, I mean, that might sum up this movie as a whole. Stupid. Also, last Johnny Cage thing. While this actor, no clue if he would have been passable in this role, but Chris Conrad will actually have a pretty big role in the first DCEU TV series Peacemaker, joining John Cena in the titular lead role. Conrad will be playing Adrian Chase, aka Vigilante. These roles were separated in the CW on Arrow, but while we had no clue what he would have done as Johnny Cage, we can at least see him in a show that is clearly set up for more success. The dialogue in the first movie may have been cheesy, but it was palatable. In this movie, somehow, it's just like really bad. Hitting you over the head with dumb morals and sayings, it's painfully bad and not enjoyable, just dull and droll. This movie also went hard on robot ninjas, and partly just including as many characters as you could cram in. Yes, the references to the source material of two Sub-Zeros, one being the brother, and having Kitana do more fighting with her signature blade fans. There's some attention detail moments, although those blades looked flimsy and terribly made from a prop standpoint. But somehow, they found a way to make every CGI fight moment look awful. From missiles to water/ice powers to whatever they did with the chain for Scorpion. And every portal ever in this movie looks awful. Having Scorpion, supposedly the hardest, most badass character in this franchise, use punk skater kid language, shouting out "sucker" after a fight. You have to wonder, what happened here when they were making this? It's funny that the more they try to do making their fights more cinematically exciting, the worse they are. The actual physical hand-to-hand fight choreography looks pretty good, but when they add these terrible special effects, it just gets bad. Also, somehow in this movie, they have more grunts for every single kick and punch thrown. Maybe I didn't notice it all for the first movie, but here it's painfully bad. It's like if the Kapalwazams in the Batman 60s show weren't just seen, but they had the characters saying them instead of showing them on the screen. It would just be strange, and that's how it was here. They threw in so many people, and they even found ways to put throwaway lines mentioning Cabal and Stryker and all these other characters. It's neat. It's not a lot, but it's fine. They even have Purple Rain in there as a water ninja named Free Prince Song, who's quickly gone. They fly through their characters like it's nobody's business. Cabal actually looks pretty cool in his live-action debut in the 2021 film. I like his powers and his character design and voice. Actually, I like Cabal seeing him. Now we just need someone to make Stryker look cool in the next one. It's great that they made Fatality references in the first film. That's a staple of this franchise. And they have these moments they mentioned, animalities, all these other things that seem to have great tie-ins to the overall source material. But somehow, all these things are terrible on the surface and in the core of this movie. And it takes these moments that could have been neat, and they just don't matter in this grand scheme of things. But it is cool that Liu can become a dragon like his character. How it looks, that's another story. I know we hadn't really talked about Sonya Blade in either film, and I don't think she really does a whole lot. I think in the first film, the Special Forces angle is cool, killing Kano is cool. I don't know if they fully knew what to do with her character. In this movie, I feel like I don't like her character at all. I don't know if it's just generic or bad. Something is once again just missing. Not that the original one was amazing, but this new one ain't it. If you want the epitome of what these movies are, massive robot arms jacks punching a toothy mess of a CGI rubber blob till it retreats into a cave. Not sure what that is, but something clearly went wrong in this movie. A lot of somethings went wrong. And how did they take another character who's pretty integral to the franchise and just have him take someone on a spirit quest and that's it? I mean, it's just what happened. And like the animality thing is cool, but they just found a use to make him teach something and then be gone. Speaking of teachers, New Raiden is like a more annoying goofball than the past. And his jokes just don't land. I know, costume design is pretty terrible in the sequel. And partly in the past too. But somehow the big bad Shao Kahn is tiny. And he doesn't wear his mask most of the time. It's just all wrong. His army's a bunch of random dudes on horseback. It's just painful overall. They have so many characters and it's just tough to keep up with them all. And Baraka is a main character of the series. Maybe not anyone's favorite, but he's a known character. And they did this character design painfully bad. Think of, I mean, to be fair, it's a monster with sharp teeth and razors coming out of his arms. And this is that, but think of that monster, you know, with a Party City Halloween rubber mask. And they somehow treat so many characters with rich stories as nothing more than pawns and minions who are killed off in a dumb, quick, and easy fight. Each one always feels like it's like a useless fight. Just like what they did in the first movie to the two lead ninjas. But they either kill off characters or just never revisit them. Somehow, Scorpion and Sub-Zero's brother are briefly seen, but nothing happens after that to those useless, poor, representations of those characters. They're real suckers. I'm not gonna lie, this movie is bad. There's no doubting that. But when they finally try to have the big old battle, the end mass group of one fighters taking on the other side's fighters, it's possible to have too much going on, but also nothing exciting happening simultaneously. I maybe didn't think it was gonna exist, but this movie proves that can happen. Somehow all these fights are boring and they just drag on with dumb one-liners throughout. Also, something weird about Jax's arms just being like metal gauntlets and robot muscle enhancers and not replacing his actual arms. Clearly, the new movie did that right. The trailer even had the clip of his arms being frozen off in a fight, leaving them to need repairs and replacements to the ones we've come to expect. They just didn't know what to do with that character design, and they just changed things that they didn't need to for unknown reasons. But yeah, all the big climactic fights are worse than I remember watching them years ago. At least most of the fights were good fisticuffs. Here, so much random stuff is just flying around, and I genuinely don't care about anything going on screen. So when Liu Kang finally does get to do his animality that we've been building up, the dragon looks as bad as you would expect it to, with the track record of special effects in this franchise. And don't worry, Shao Kahn becomes a gross-looking Hydra dragon. Not gross as in realistic gross. Gross as in the second to last fight we see is now just two rubbery monsters swatting away at each other. It's painfully bad. And the cutaways to the normal characters just watching things went so wrong so quickly, and having that even be a moment here. At least, if you're going to just throw in random Mortal Kombat things, choose friendships to be a part of this. That would have been a riot. Every CGI, not one of them, looks good in this entire hour-and-a-half film. At least they used the catchy song for the final person battle. For some reason, this feels worse compared to the Shang Tsung fight in the first movie. Like I said, everything that could went wrong here. And like I said in previous episodes, any movie that flashes through random locales in the world, just quickly going through, oh, we're in Paris, oh, we're in Japan, oh, we're in, who knows, right? Just any random places. If it isn't a disaster movie, it still is probably not a good sign for quality of a movie. The disaster movies are pretty bad when they do that. This is no exception. It's a bad movie. No defending it. If you can defend it, please reach out to me on social and tell me how. But the biggest question is the new version redeeming to the notion that a good Mortal Kombat movie can exist. The first one is funny, but probably not considered good. The second one is just terrible. But can a karate tournament movie be good and blend together a mix of humor, darker if possible, also with over-the-top action and gore? Let's find out together. So the latest and greatest of beating someone up with their own ripped-off arm. The 2021 version of Mortal Kombat the movie. To start, fans of the AMC martial arts show Into the Badlands will recognize Louis Tan as a character who was in about a third of the show. He also had a brief role in Deadpool 2. Joss Lawson isn't a name most would know, but Ken Shallenby from Anchorman 2 in a fighting role just sounds wild off the bat. While the most known going into this was Mehcad Brooks, coming off his Supergirl stint. Superhero fan Nick recognized Tadanobu Ashano from his Thor franchise days, as well as Hiroyuki Sanada from multiple Marvel franchises. So now that we're done with our actor overview, which I know some, maybe you do too, let's dive into the movie itself. The movie actually kicks off on a pretty grounded foot and delivers a family loss storyline with some amazing combat and gore. And it looks cool, brutal, and immediately all about the over-the-top violence that has some stakes built in. And while we don't start off with some guy yelling about Mortal Kombat and laser sounds and 80s synths, there being at least some focus on the titular ninjas, it's crucial to what makes this franchise what it is. Something that was lost in the first films. And thankfully the sword violence and fight choreography, losing limbs, things going through heads, it's so good. And seeing origins for the get over here chain, chef's kiss. All from an actor who is 60 doing all these physical stunts. Love to see it. Just throwing this out there, our first look at Raiden, and he looks amazing and so cool. Thankfully it's more than that, But just that first look at him, OMG, so much better. No disrespect to James Remar as an actor or the first actor, but even a brief cool look at Raiden, like, they've realized what to actually do with him this time around. He's the god of thunder, not an endless well of one-liners. I feel like I watched this movie, a lot of it, and I was like, I had to pause and think about how the different characters existed with each other and who was considered good and bad. I had to do some research, and I didn't think I was mixing up my Ice Ninjas, but I always, I guess, figured Sub-Zero was like the heroic one and Scorpion was the evil one. I mean, yes, there was the whole premeditated murder part, but no matter what, man, they made the ice powers look so much like cooler here. They're dangerous. They're not like badly animated ice beam, but sharp, deadly ice spikes aplenty and like weaponized hail. Even though it was in the trailer, like when you saw non-metal arms Jax, they were gonna be kicking rocks soon enough. And like in that trailer, you saw the arms freeze off, and when they got shattered off, like that's the unadulterated violence you'd expect from a franchise that birthed the ESRB video game rating system as we know it. It better have spine ripping out and more. Although, spoiler alert, there was a part where you saw a little spine, but we haven't yet to actually see the spine ripping happening here. There's movies where spine ripping happens, but this is not one of them. Why do I feel like I talked about a movie recently that had it? Gosh, that's gonna make me wonder. I'm not looking it up, but I swear I talked about that in another movie thing fairly recently enough. Even when the scene setting, and they have to set a lot of scenes in this movie coming, you have to assume there's fans of it, but there's also people who have no clue. So you have to set some stuff up. And yes, it teases Outworld a few times. You're never really transported there this movie, but you got to see it at least. And for starters, I like that it's more of a desolate planet than just like hellscape. And there's actually a population, not just some CGI blobs running amok, whoa, all around, They're real characters that live there. I mean, there's a lot more human people than you'd think. There should be more creatures, but they'd have to be good-looking creatures. But either way, it's nice to have a population that exists. And I know, this movie is loaded with characters, just like the second one, and the franchise is rich in history, like we said. It's nice to see the references here don't feel like they're just storylines to get you somewhere. The hope is when you see a picture of Nightwolf, like, the hope is you're going to meet him in a later film. They do this again at the end in a very good cliffhanger ending. And I guess preemptively, spoiler alert for this movie that just came out today. Just spoiler alert. It should have been implied, but spoiler alert. But seeing him and hoping he's in the future films or future film or has some, on-camera version of him, I feel like that's way better. Even if it's just a photo of him, the use they had for him was just to teach Liu Kang how to become a CGI dragon. I mean, that's not it. That Annihilation version was bad. It would have been tough, speaking of other characters, to make Reptile worse than the first movie. They didn't here, thankfully. Like, it's not knockoff, bad-looking Randall from Monsters, Inc. Instead, it's like a mini Godzilla, just coming off that HBO Max Monsters movie marathon. And while the look is fine, not amazing, it's fine, seeing its heart get punched out, that was some diabolical, beautiful gore. And like Johnny Cage before, Kano in this movie, who I never would have thought, especially his first portrayal on live action, like, he's without doubt the most fun, charismatic character here. I mean, it's just sometimes when you hear the voice, I still can't not think of Australian news tycoon Ken Shallenby, who gets in fights with Ron Burgundy. Ron Burgundy probably lose a fight against this character. I guess, having Johnny Cage and Kano in the same movie would have been a bit too much, with quips flowing a mile a minute, but almost halfway through the movie, I was asking myself and wondering actively why and where Johnny Cage was, and why weren't those hater blockers present? And I know we'll get to it at the end, but gosh, I just wanted him in this movie from the get-go. The one thing I think that probably surprised me the most, and clearly you knew Cole was the leader and the lead of this movie, maybe not the leader of the group, but the lead you're supposed to focus on the movie. Not having that be Liu Kang, who's the usual hero of the movies and video games, is relegated to more of a emissary for Raiden role. the character that is usually the hero of the world. I'd say this movie clearly has a more mixed ensemble cast feeling. I mean, you're supposed to be all about Cole, but still, clearly more ensemble. And Kano, as great as he is going to be evil eventually. More so than even Mysterio. If you were a Spider-Man person, you knew in that latest movie he was for sure going to be bad eventually. They did a good job hiding it, but if you knew the character, you knew that they weren't revamping that one. I mean, there's so many characters you know and recognize, and they're all beautifully created and realized here in live action. Reptile, hit or miss, but other than that, it's better than the other Reptile we got too. Even if there are some big omissions. We already talked about Johnny Cage, but the love interest to Liu Kang Kitana, also not here. Her weapon, fan blades, are in the background, so she must exist in this world if her evil counterpart is. It's just weird that they introduced that evil counterpart before they introduced the main version in Kitana. And who knows, maybe that's someone they'll find, and yeah, they're gonna look for more people in the second movie. I really want to say the thing, but I'm gonna wait till the end to say the thing I want to say. It really did remind me a bit of the old Resident Evil movies. Ton of characters from the source material and one new character. Although Mila Jovovich was clearly the only character they cared about in that franchise. Here the love is a bit more spread out, even if it takes a bit of time to give our new film lead Cole his time in the sun. He's not just the only character that matters and they're just killing off name brand characters right and left. It's a balance. You gotta respect the source material, but try to make something a little different with it, so you're not just retelling the same thing over and over again. And while we did get some new characters in here, the most exciting one, at least in the trailer, had to be seeing Kung Lao in live action for the first time. Frisbee throwers, all the rage now, with Captain America and the latest now from Falcon and the Winter Soldier just wrapping up also today. Something that we will talk about in next week's episode. If we're talking about new cool characters that I feel like I knew were in the movie but didn't know a whole lot about them, I thought the look of Cabal super cool. The masked guy with the two hook blade things, and as much as I liked his storyline from the later Mortal Kombat games of being a police guy, I guess you have so many of those type of characters, Jack, Sonya, Stryker, and you have too many that they have to balance them out. So they went with him and the Kano gang relationship instead. It's just every so often I was watching this and had to like pause and think and Google, who is that character's relationship with other characters, and if it's different times. My game knowledge made me constantly question what I know is real or not. And I constantly wasn't sure what was going on from that sense. But if you like stop and let the movie exist, it's so much better. If you're a game fan, you'll get it. I just was questioning which storyline, which character was real and evil, but I probably did too much thinking and not as much watching on some of those quizzical question parts with his character and with Sub-Zero's character. I do like the angle they went of, instead of saying Kano can just have laser blasts because he has a metal eye or whatever their versions of things are, they kind of said, okay, you have awakened potential because of something or some reason. And it felt like a way to slightly ground a mythical aspect to this world and not just saying this guy has fire hands because he has fire hands. And a lot of people have some over specialized thing. Like, it just works for me. And a character like Cabal, who I didn't even know, or at least remember having crazy powers, like being super fast, and just everyone looked and sounded super cool in this movie. Almost everyone. There's one that I'm not sure about, and it makes sense by the end of the movie. Kind of. Somehow, Shang Tsung, one of the most fun, albeit cheesy characters in the first movie, the big bad. A bit of a disappointment, lost all of matter of his charm and charisma. And it's not replaced by anything substantial. There's no crazy menace. He's a bit bland in all honesty, and hopefully he gets some sort of menace power glow up as we go, and maybe they'll tie that into his eventual big bad big boss. But if we're talking positive glow ups and not hopeful ones, CGI Goro, the proportions just made sense here, and he looks so much better and less goofy. I guess the CGI world has really grown from the better, after all things, especially from the later MCU movies on. They can make a good Hulk that looks and sounds about right, not like the Ang Lee one, boom, still making those references and jokes. But if they can make a good-looking creature Hulk thing in 2008, nowadays they should be able to do anything, right? One thing all three movies have done is throw in fun franchise words. And it's easy, but to try to throw them in and not be so goofy, or to make goofy intentionally. But this movie they had, test your might, insert character name wins, and hearing the first flawless victory. It's just as fun as the first time I heard it, repurposed and remade in movie form. I have to say, there's a chunk of this movie where they really take a break from the gore and fights for character development, which, while it all helps for the overall story, when we finally do have that action-packed last third of more gore, boy does Kung Lao bring it. Look, saw blade hats are going to lead to someone getting cut the freak up, and seeing any character get saw bladed in half, boy does that look sweet. Well, I don't really understand Cole's powers. Seeing him rip open Goro and disembowel him and all that Mortal Kombat fun. The tail end of this movie truly has some amazing, disgusting displays, and it does a good enough job balancing most of the storylines, even if Liu Kang only does so much overall. I'm hoping to give him that romance arc, but find a way to do it tastefully, not forcing it down our gullets. But that would be nice to give him a little more something to do with Kitana. While this story really shies away from this tournament actually happening, which is a bit of a letdown. The fighting, which is so good and looks awesome, is just somehow it takes place before we as viewers get to see any tournament. And that's a bit of a disappointment. Like, the tournament setting is the whole point. Thankfully, the gore and violence is as amazing and beautiful as it could be, but it's a little bit goofy how their whole strategy is to make it a, air quotes, tournament. The end is an action-packed romp, and boy is it fun. It's a little crazy that it takes so long to see Scorpion after the beginning, but when he finally is on full display, the big bad ninja fight, freezing a guy's blood and stabbing him with that same blood frozen sword, it looks so good. So many good moments happen in this fight, being a half skeleton and breathing fire, hearing the get over here. I love it so much. We needed more of this in the first one badly, and they are not main characters here either. But at least that story is told, or at least it has begun to be told. And that kind of brings us to the biggest surprise. This movie was made not with a clear end, but as a movie that needs 2, 3, they said 4 more movies to tell the whole arc. Thankfully, Cole is not Johnny Cage or just Scorpion 2.0. To their credit, they make their own unique character, and it's a fun enough version of someone different. Unlike the Resident Evil movies, which once again, I overall enjoy and acknowledge their shortcomings, they had a new character and still respect those that are a part of the past in source material. I kind of knew Kung Lao was going to die. It's kind of his whole shtick. But he got his cool moment in there at least. And the little hat portal thing was another fun video game moment to not just make him a guy with a hat blade, but a magic hat blade. While I want a tournament, not just a war, I am excited for what has been laid out, even if it's not fully done. But that one thing I've been getting at, that amazing morsel to tease us, and spoilers aplenty, it's in fact that Johnny Cage will clearly be a part of the next film or films to come, and seems to for sure lead itself to the movie ends immediately thinking of going out to Hollywood with the Johnny Cage movie poster. Oh, it's so good. Look, this movie jumps around a ton. It covers a lot of stories at once, like the DCU tried to do. Both work to a point, but the hope is they allow this franchise to finish the story they want to tell. And man, they better be, like, amazing when it comes to casting Johnny Cage. Like, please find someone good. The only real gripe I have is that we didn't really get an end. Like, it's somehow making the movie with sequels in mind. It feels like this movie just ends too quickly, kind of like the Harry Potter Part 1. And they also somehow made Shang Tsung seem super weak and useless. He never fought the whole film, which feels like a bit of a let-off in kind of the whole I'll be back thing. Even though he does get to steal at least one soul. Even though he didn't earn it, but, you know, we'll let that part just resonate as it is, as another noise. And obviously, I want some Mortal Kombat actual tournaments to happen. The list is going to be pretty obvious, but here it is anyway. Number 3, the worst piece of rubbish in the world, Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Number 2 has to be the 1995 Mortal Kombat. It's fun, it's goofy. Johnny Cage, Shang Tsung, so good. And I like the core of characters, not so much how they were supposed to be, but how they worked with what they had. Liu Kang was pretty likable. Sonya Blade was pretty likable overall. Mortal Kombat 2021 has to be the top of this list. It almost feels like there's no option. The gore is better. It feels like they do more with the overall characters, especially Sub-Zero and Scorpion. Even if it's just a little more, they do more, which is important. We'll see who new Cole develops to be. Give me that Johnny Cage as we go. Kano was hilarious in that movie, but I need more. It's the top right now, but we'll see if we end up doing this episode again, and we might just skip the 2 oldies and go straight to the 4 or 5 new Mortal Kombat in that action-packed franchise that we may or may not get. But that's the end of this Mortal Kombat episode as it stands. So I have to finish him. And I tweeted it before, but I'm definitely feeling the techno remix of the Mortal Kombat theme song. It will never top the original 80s, 90s glory of the original, but I do like them both as their own individual tracks, but the new one can feel like a sequel to the first one that works with it and is still fun on its own right. So yeah, overall, the future of the series looks bright. I hope we get some more time with these characters. Give me my Johnny Cage, maybe some justice for Kung Lao, and let's give that Katana Liu Kang storyline a little romance. And we'll see, maybe, I guess you don't want to juggle too many relationships, but Johnny Cage, Sonya, like, it could work. Also, was it just me, or did Cole's powers kind of remind you of the Black Panther suit? With, like, the absorbing powers and kinetic energy and such? I do want to see if Cole gets any more Scorpion moments, or if that relationship is explored further. What about you? What was your favorite part of these 3 films, especially the new one? Or what was your favorite overall? If you say Annihilation, I need to hear from you why, and honestly, I might need a written essay on my desk tomorrow telling me why you like that movie the best of these 3. I think it's impossible. Who knows? But if you preferred the original or the new one, let's talk about all the fatalities and fun this franchise and game property is known for. Hit me up on social, knickknackmovies or knickknack_IC on either Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. Well, that's all for me, so cheers, and until next time, cinephiles. Are you not entertained? I think this is gonna be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.